Well, hello, Sterling College. It's Paul Brandis again. I get the honor and privilege of serving as your chaplain. And today I'm bringing you again one of my friends. I always have my friends with me, and this is a familiar face to you. So we have one of your friends, the campus counselor, Lydia Butner. Lydia, why don't you go ahead and give a wave and say hello?
Hello.
Yeah, there she is. So she is still working diligently. If you have a need of counseling, Lydia is still doing that, even in this strange moment. But we thought that it would be good for the two of us to spend some time chatting. And hopefully, this will be helpful to you about a couple different things that her and I have been thinking about. And we've certainly both, I'm sure, talked about these topics with students. Both generally, we do this type of conversation, but then specifically, the two topics that we've chosen today have a lot of application to our current kind of curious and strange and difficult moment that we're all living in. And one of those is this topic, Lydia, of acceptance. Acceptance. And that word, I know for me and probably for many people that are watching us, it brings up certain meanings. We're attached. I have meanings that are attached to that word, and I don't want to accept these changes because they're hard and they're difficult. And I wish I was still with students and that we were still having chapel and that things hadn't changed. So what don't we mean by acceptance, and why might it be good for us to kind of walk that journey, even if it's hard?
Yeah, so acceptance can have that. Often the most common connotation is approval. If
Mm,
you're accepting something, and that's usually in terms of something that someone's doing to you. So but that is not necessarily what it is. You can accept without approving, because you can say, this is what's happening. I don't like it. I don't agree with it, but still I can't change it. So that's one of the main things that acceptance does not necessarily have to include is approval. Another thing that it does not have to include is being, so-called being over it. Like
yeah.
you can accept that this, pandemic has caused major upheaval in your life without being through with processing it. The
Yeah.
acceptance is part of the process and not necessarily the end result of the process, if that makes sense. Um,
Yeah,
Go
it
ahead.
does. No, it definitely does make sense. And I hear people talk about that a lot. Well, time will help you get over it. And,
Mhm.
I don't know how much we get over big events, especially big losses in our life. In my
Mhm.
own journey and with the people that I've worked with, we certainly move forward. We move forward, and that's maybe more what we mean by acceptance. I know you're going to flesh out some of the positive definitions of what we mean by it. I think we certainly move forward, but we move forward with them a part of us because they impact us and change us and form and shape us, the good and the bad, and the difficult and the joyful. And this one's been really difficult. So I like that. We're not necessarily getting over it, but that's not what we're talking about with acceptance.
Yeah, yeah. You don't have to get over it in order to accept it. And like you said, this is going to have far-reaching implications, beyond this year, beyond, this is life-changing type of situation here. So, um, another thing that acceptance does not necessarily, well, acceptance should not really include is kind of mitigating or minimizing the situation,
Yeah.
having that no big deal type of attitude, unless it really isn't a big deal. But in this case, this is truly a big deal. And so it would definitely be a red flag for me if I was talking to someone and they were saying, oh, it's not a big deal, it's fine. That acceptance should not necessarily include that as well. So I think that's an important thing to note.
Yeah, and what are some of the things that it does include? So if we're talking about
Yeah.
positive acceptance that can be helpful to us in the midst of this journey, flesh that out for us a little bit more. What should it include, or what are you looking for in conversations with people where you're helping them navigate some of this?
Yeah. So jumping off that platform of minimizing, I said we shouldn't be minimizing unless it really isn't a big deal. So really, what acceptance is when we're able to see a situation objectively, see it for the facts of it, and say, this is happening, I can't change it. So school did get moved to online. I did have to move back in with my parents. That happened, and being able to acknowledge, the facts of the situation, and then our reactions to it. So the way that we're thinking about it, the way that we're feeling about it, and then being able to just sit with that. That's what acceptance is. It's being able to take however long. It's different for every situation. In this case, I would guess that it would be a bit of a longer process to move toward acceptance, but that can be a really quick kind of split-second thing for smaller situations. But it's being able to really acknowledge for yourself, this is what's happened, this is how I'm thinking about it, this is how I'm feeling about it, and then just giving yourself the space to sit with that for a little while. So as I've been, go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask, because you said the first step in the midst of that is an acknowledgement of the objective facts of the situation.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes in my own life, maybe a little bit with this current moment even, I find that I'm too close to the situation to be objective about it. Like, I have so many strong emotions, and I just feel like I'm on this roller coaster ride that I really struggle with an objective telling. And I wonder if others might be in that spot, and what you might offer to us as a way forward or encouragement when we find ourselves kind of just all over the place, and an objective telling of what has happened is even a really hard first step to take.
Yeah, so there's several different tools that you can try to move yourself toward being able to acknowledge those cannot change facts. So the first and best thing to try is talking to someone. So someone that you trust, that is really going to listen and try and understand what you're saying, because that person will be asking questions. They'll be, reflecting back to you what you've said. And then if you hear it, then that can help you to say, oh, that's not really how it is. I'm being affected by how I'm feeling. And so that'd be one thing. Another thing is to ask yourself, how are other people viewing the situation? Or how would I view it if I wasn't feeling this way? Would be another thing to try. So those are two, just off the top of my head, tools.
Yeah, those are really helpful. And in terms of people to talk to, I mean, do you think, you said somebody that you trust, is that like, should I go to a friend? Should I maybe go to a counselor? Like, what barometer, or sort of what are you looking for in terms of who even the right person to talk to is? How do I find someone like that? I mean, hopefully I've got people that I can trust, but is there different metrics or reasons why you would sort of counsel one person to go here or there, or is it depending on the severity of the situation, or what factors go into play?
Yeah, like I said, it's really talking to someone who is going to try and understand what you're saying, who is really going to listen to what you're saying. And I think if you're able to speak to a friend, or speak to, maybe it's your great aunt that lives in Minnesota, and that if you call her, she really tries to understand what you're saying. So it doesn't have to be someone that you speak to regularly. It doesn't have to be someone that's normally your go-to, but just really someone that will try to listen and understand. Because that's the first goal that I have for counseling, is to really listen and understand what people are saying, and then go from there. So I would say, in terms of when you want to seek out a counselor, that would be if either you don't have someone that you can talk to, or if you do talk to that person, the great aunt or your mom or your best friend, or that person that did really listen, try and understand what you were saying, and it didn't really help. You're still having some of those red flag type symptoms, which would be difficult sleeping, eating, feeling hopeless, helpless,
Yeah.
unmotivated, unenergetic, things like that. You're not able to get your school done.
Well, I know my great aunt in Minnesota always helps. So you hit the nail right on the head. Yeah, no, I like that. That's really, really helpful. And then when we've taken that step and, and that step is recommended across industries, I find, because I was reflecting on even in business literature, I've read kind of this concept of facing the brutal facts. It's hard to take any other steps if we're not realizing the objectivity of what faces us. And so after we've taken that step, though, that's helpful in acceptance, and we're able to then have a better way of seeing how we're responding to what has happened and the objectivity of it. And then once we've done those two things, you talked about sort of sitting with those for a bit, and the kind of the two sides of that, both the objective happenings that we have gone through and then how we're responding to it in a variety of ways. Help us with that sitting with it, period. What does that look like?
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure it's different for people, and even different based on um, like what your worldview is. Like you might counsel followers of Jesus in a particular way around in that moment than you would someone who says, I'm not really a follower of Jesus, but what are some things in the midst of that part of acceptance?
Yeah. So with the sitting with it, it's a very abstract concept. It's tricky to
Yeah, flesh that out for
put it
us.
into a sentence. Um, but essentially, the way that I think about it is coming to peace with
Mm.
it, being able to have a calm in the midst of whatever is happening, which is again still pretty abstract, but it's and there's tons of kind of coming to peace with it is kind of just a catchphrase that we say, not a
Mm-hmm.
catchphrase, but something that we say. We say you have to come to you have to come to terms with it. And I think that those are really denoting acceptance. So I think that's what I mean by it.
Yeah.
It's being able to acknowledge it and being able to say, this is what's happening. And that's not just in our, we're going to talk about the mind body connection in a few moments, but that's not just how we're thinking and how we're feeling about it, but you can actually feel that in your body.
Yes.
So if it's a quicker situation, the one that I always use in counseling is if I'm at the dinner table and my kids are screaming, that's something that I don't want to accept. I don't approve of that. That doesn't feel right. But I have to, in that quick moment, say, okay, they're screaming. This is happening. I'm getting stressed out. I'm thinking this should not be happening. But I have to come to peace with it, and I have to be able to be calm physiologically before I can take a step forward. Because if I take a step forward when it's all jumbled up and it's all chaotic and stressful, it's not going to be a good step.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really hard to determine what the next right thing is if we have
Mm-hmm.
not first named objectively what's happening, and then two, assessed what our reaction is to it. If we try to take steps when we haven't had those, if we try to take the next right step when we haven't done those first two things, then typically, I know in my own life, I take the wrong step. And we're both parents of young kids, and so that example really resonates with me. And too often in my parenting, I have not named objectively what's happening. I have not acknowledged that I'm having a strong emotional reaction to it. And because I haven't done those things, I step out and I do it in a way that I wouldn't have wanted if I had been able to sort of slow down in that moment. And so that example I know really helps me. I'm not sure it helps all of our college students, although we have some parents in our college student ranks. And so, but it is a good example to kind of show what it is that we're talking about. And I like the word peace as well. I think that word has deep resonance with the Christian story and the Christian view of the world. And a verse that I have been reflecting on and praying for people just so regularly is Philippians 4, chapter 7, when the Apostle Paul talks about having a peace that surpasses understanding. And what I like about that verse is, we shouldn't really have peace with the objective facts the way they are right now, because of how crazy the world is and how upside down it is and how difficult this moment is, living in the midst of a global pandemic. And yet, not always, but a lot of times I've been able to have a peace, and that peace surpasses understanding. And part of that is because I've sort of walked this journey of acknowledging objectively what's happening. I have named my emotional reactions to it, and I've accepted it. And I've done that as a Christian by the power of the Holy Spirit. And I've been granted this peace that actually is kind of hard to explain, but it's the peace that surpasses understanding. So that's one of my favorite verses for these moments.
Me too. That's exactly what I was thinking when you mentioned the verse. And that's the moving forward is how we get to the peace, and then how we move forward also comes out of our worldview and out of what we value and how we want to act. So I know there were a lot of conversations in my house in the first couple weeks of this, of just, okay, this is what's happening, first the coming to peace with it, and then and what do we do? How do we respond based on our Christian values? And so I think this is part of what's tricky for you lovely college students that are hopefully watching this, is because you're still at that place in life where, do you know for sure what you value and what's important to you? That's kind of what you're working on in college, and then to have this big test of acceptance and test of how do you move forward. It's kind of a get thrown in the deep end moment, I think, for those that are 20, 22, 23.
Well, it absolutely is. And I have thought about, how would I have responded if this happened in the middle of my senior year or junior year, freshman year, sophomore year, or whatever. I'm particularly thinking about our seniors and how heartbroken I am for them, and these changes, these challenges, this test coming in the middle of that moment for them. And Lydia and I both want to say we're here for you. If you want to connect and dialogue about that, and if you want help in navigating a pathway towards acceptance, we'd love to offer ourselves as conversation partners in the midst of that. We might not be as good as your great aunt in Minnesota, but we're certainly willing to try. And before, I do want to ask you about mind and body connection in the midst of all of this, because it absolutely, there is one. But you have a prayer that you, I think, probably pray yourself and encourage others to pray. And what I like about prayer is that I think kind of everyone prays. It might not be in the same sorts of ways, but I don't know that you have to be a Christian to try this one out. And so why don't you tell us about that, and then we'll talk for a minute about the connection between our mind and bodies.
Sure. So this prayer is probably most well known because it's on Alcoholics Anonymous.
Yeah, that is a good one.
Ariel is the organization that's most widely adopted the prayer. So this is said at the beginning and end, I believe, of every meeting for AA and SA, all of the anonymous meetings. But I did look up. I did not know who actually wrote it, but it was Reinhold Niebuhr. Supposedly wrote this and prayed it at a church event or something like that in the 40s. But it's the Serenity Prayer. So it's just all about acceptance. And I quote it often in counseling sessions. So if you've been in counseling with me, you've probably heard it, and we've gone through it and we've said, okay, in this situation, how does this apply? So yes, did you want to read it?
Yeah, I can go ahead and read it. Should I do the whole thing here, or just that first section? What do you think?
I love the whole thing. I honestly love the whole thing.
I'm going to do the whole thing. Okay, here it is. God, grant us the serenity, which is, is just a kind of the ability to think or pray, have peace about. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardships as the pathway to peace, taking, as Jesus did, this sinful world as it is, not as I would have it, trusting that he will make all things right if I surrender to his will, that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with him forever in the next. Amen.
Amen.
Well, and Lydia, tell us about a little more, whether it be in the midst of kind of a journey on acceptance, but talk to us about the connection between our mind and bodies. There's definitely one there. Flesh that out for us a little more.
Yeah. So it's a newer-ish area of research for the medical community. I say ish because, 20, 30 years they've been researching this. But historically, and in more Eastern medicine, that's just always been the way that it's done. There's always been an understanding that's what's happening in your body is going to be affecting your mind and vice versa. And so, and when I say mind, I don't necessarily mean your brain. When I say mind, I'm meaning your thoughts, your memories, your experiences, your feelings. It's more the internal world.
Yeah.
It's the part of you that a doctor cannot observe or that a doctor cannot prove is happening. And then when I say body, I'm talking about the more observable, those physiological functions, eating, sleeping, all of that. So essentially the connection can best be seen when we're talking about stress. So we have certain things that we are thinking about or things that we're remembering that are causing our brains to activate the stress kind of nervous systems. And I won't get into all the technical terms and everything, but essentially activate the stress processes in our brains, which activate the stress process in our body. And so we end up with those physical symptoms, the stomach hurting or the palms getting sweaty or shaky, things like that. And so that's the easiest mind body kind of connection to draw from, but there's definitely more to it than that.
Well, and
that's the easiest way to see the picture of it.
Well, and I find that often my body knows I'm stressed before my thoughts know that I'm stressed. So one of the ways that my body exhibits stress actually is that my shoulders clench, and I'll kind of be in this hunched, and it's like my posture's bad, and I'm kind of up and I'm clenched, and I'll realize that I'm doing that, and then my thoughts and my inner being, my inner world will catch up and be like, oh, I must be stressed. And then I can do a sort of assessment of what's going on and why might that be and what's happening. And I walk that pathway, that kind of journey to acceptance that we're talking about. But, that's one of the things that I've noticed is that my body actually catches it before sometimes my thoughts even do, because maybe I'm engaged in work or I'm doing something, I'm really focused on a particular task or something like that. But then if I slow down and listen to my body, it's like, oh my goodness, I'm exhibiting signs of stress. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Me too. My stomach gets sick. That's where I see it always.
Yeah.
Stomach or hands, which is kind of a weird one that I've just realized in the past couple of years. But my hands and arms will get like all tensed up. So
yeah.
So it might be new, or maybe I just never noticed it before. I'm not sure.
Well, you mentioned the kind of Eastern medicine has long believed this, but I think this is a pretty biblical idea as well. I mean, I think we see evidences of this in how the Bible talks about who we are as human beings, and that we're connected. We're built to be integrated, and there has been a fracturing of that integration. But it's like a mirror, and we're in fact created in the image of God. And so the mirror analogy is really, it's fitting. But if you think about a cracked mirror, it still functions as a mirror, there's just cracks in it. And so there's still, the pieces still touch, there's still integration within the mirror. It's fractured integration. And
Mm-hmm.
and that's how the Bible talks about us as created beings, that we certainly do have. And the Bible uses a number of different words in the Old and New Testament to kind of draw out what Lydia is referring to as mind. And, we've talked about maybe the inner being, or our hearts is kind of a way we talk about that in the West today, but that often connotes like really heavy on emotions and not as much on thinking, and can kind of carry connotations of romantic feelings more than others. But we sometimes talk about like following our hearts in that sort of way, but sort of like this inner world that we all have. And the Bible talks about those both being important. Our bodies matter. Paul talks about that in 1 Corinthians at length. So God cares about our physical bodies, but the Jesus and others are in the Bible are very concerned about our inner worlds as well. So it makes sense, this connection that Western medicine is proving out in the last 20 or 30 years. But any more thoughts on that, or ways forward, or what we can take away from this connection?
Yeah, I think going back to the piece, I think having an understanding of how your mind and your body are working together will just give you a much richer opportunity for peace. So if you're only focusing on how you're thinking about the situation and you're not focusing on how your body's reacting, you might be missing pieces of it, and you might not have as rich of a piece as you could have if you are focused on both and on addressing both and having that awareness of how what I'm thinking affects how my body feels, and vice versa. So, and I think in this situation, the application that I would love for students to take away from this is that learning about their mind-body connection is a way to take care of themselves. And I think this is a time really important to be taking care of ourselves. And it's also a time when there's going to be more opportunity to nap. So I know some students have gone back to homes where they are the more of the caregiver, or homes where they feel like they have certain jobs that they have to fulfill. And whereas college is a place where you do have more opportunity to think about yourself, to care for yourself. So I think that's the application that I would really like people to take away from this, is just if you're taking care of yourself, you're going to be able to, the acceptance part of it is going to be easier and just kind of richer and more fulfilling.
Yeah, and share, it does make sense, and share some ways that we can do that. So really practically, what are some next steps that all of us might be able to take to ensure that we are caring for ourselves in good and appropriate ways?
Mm-hmm. So there's the basics that you've been hearing since you were 6 years old, is eat decently well. We don't have to be amazing eaters right now, but eat some protein, eat some fruits and vegetables. If you can, especially protein, because that fuels your brain. And then sleep, try and sleep. Hopefully, some of you at least have more time now to sleep, so get some more sleep than normal. Try and get outside, get moving. You don't have to, do P90X. If the young people even do that, I think that's more our age. Anyway,
I'm familiar.
You don't do that.
I'm familiar.
I know, but I don't know who students are. But anyway, you don't have to do anything crazy. You don't have to run a marathon, but just get out, get moving, get some sunshine. That's going to be wonderful, because that will build your immune system, boost your mood, get a little color, and it'll be good. And then the other thing, so those are the basics. And then if you want to take it up a notch, then start working on relaxing, essentially. Start working on figuring out, when does your body feel really relaxed, and when does your brain feel calm, and what can you do in order to achieve that as much as possible during these times. Because if you start thinking about, oh, am I still going to have my summer job, or what's school going to look like next year, or what financial problems, then that's going to raise the stress levels. So as much as possible, practicing some relaxation. And if you want ideas or help on how to do that, please, please, please shoot me an email. Or Paul, he's got the mindfulness down as well.
That's right. That's
So
right.
yes, and then have fun. Honestly, try and get out, have some fun. You hopefully everyone has opportunities to do different activities right now, or get out and do different things than normal, or different things, with your family than normal. So
Yeah,
that's
I love all of those. And Lydia, while you were talking particularly about sleep, my mind went to a verse in the book of Psalms. And if you've tracked along with anything that I've put out over the last couple of months, in the midst of this moment, it's almost everything has a psalm attached to it, because I have just been wrapping my heart, my inner world in the Psalms. And I would encourage you to do that in the midst of this. So Psalm 23 is just a go-to, but actually the verse that came to mind is Psalm 127, verse 2. And that reads this way. It says, "It is in vain that you rise up early and go late to rest, eating the bread of anxious toil." That is not good bread. It's not good bread. My wife Ashley has taken to baking homemade bread in the last couple of weeks as a just wonderful bit of creation goodness in the midst of,
okay.
we hadn't really done that before, but it's been a nice little treat in our home. I just had some for lunch a little while ago, and that was much better than the bread of anxious toil. But when I don't walk the pathway to acceptance, when I don't root myself in who I know God to be and who I know I am because of who he says I am, then I find that this is what I do. I struggle to sleep. I wake up early. I go to bed late. I'm not taking care of that basic need. I eat the bread of anxious toil and I have no peace. But the ending of that verse is this way. Basically, it's you don't have to do that because God gives to his beloved sleep. God gives to his beloved sleep. So it is in vain that you rise up early and go late to rest, eating the bread of anxious toil, because God gives to his beloved sleep. So if you're laying in bed at night and can't sleep, just remember God gives to his beloved sleep. So hopefully you'll go take a nap after you watch this video and go
Remember
rest.
that. And
Yes.
while you're remembering that, take deep breaths and try and focus on calming your body.
Yes, exactly. So
Okay.
remember, Lydia and I are here for you if you want to reach out. Thank you so much, Lydia. Appreciate you giving us some time today. And we will see all you students and employees hopefully in person soon. Love you guys so much. Bye-bye.